Good morning. Maybe you can hear the construction noise in the background, but hopefully not. Talking to you about shakuhachi and stress today. This came out of a conversation that I had with my wife this morning. Um, we were talking about stress and how we deal with it. Now, okay, so my wife is a psychologist. I'm a shakuhachi player, maker, whatever. Um, And I'm not talking to you as anybody who's an expert in psychology or neuroscience or anything like that. But some of the things that we were talking about, like, wow, that really kind of relates to what I'm doing with shakuhachi, I thought. So I thought I'd share it with you. So, first of all, here's what I'm talking about. Right, you notice there, my tsumeri, my chimeri, yeah, chimeri came in there a little bit, are not necessarily as deep as you'd expect if you're used to listening to modern shakuhachi, right? That's the way we do it old style. So the question is why? Why do old style shakuhachi players play in a way that seems either out of tune or like something's wrong with it when you first hear it? Now, I don't think that's the case. It's not actually out of tune. It's just in tune, differently tuned. Um, and I'm not just saying that to be polite. It actually is differently tuned, and there's several reasons why. But I'm not going to go into all of them right now. I just wanted to talk about it in terms of stress. So, stress. What happens? Basically, as I understand it, we have our autonomic nervous system, right? That kind of is in control of all the things that we don't control consciously. Uh, One of the things on the fringe of that is our breath, but then even more like our heartbeat, our gland secretions, and all these things that we don't have to think about to do. And in that, you've got the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. It's basically like the work, attention nerves, and the relaxing nerves. And it's kind of like breathing in and out, right? Or like Freud said, we've got to have work and love to live well. And I think he's right about that. Um, you work, you kind of are focused, you're using your energy, you've got this active attention. Then in love, you've got you can rest. You're okay just as you are. You don't have to grow or anything. You can just kind of rest into being loved and loving, right? So you've got work and you've got love, and the two balance each other out really nice. You need some of this and you need some of that, just like you have to breathe in and you have to breathe out. What happens if you're not balanced right? Right? What if your life isn't centered? It's like you're always breathing in or like you're always breathing out. Either way, you're going to run out of oxygen and you're going to start to feel smothered. So that's kind of what happens when you've got too much stress, right? When you're feeling stressed, for example, let's say you're a little bit stressed at work. And then on top of that, when you come home, you can't really relax. You've got a bunch of stuff to do. Or maybe your home life isn't great for some reason, right? So you've got stress here and then you've got stress there. Um, that's when the stress response system starts to kind of work against you. Because you get stressed, your body secretes cortisol, the stress hormone, right? And that gives you a little bit of extra energy, extra attention, because there's a task that you feel, oh, it's going to stretch me a little bit. I'm not quite up to this task. The stress response helps you to be up to the task, get the little extra amount of energy and attention that you need to absorb that, to learn it well, and then to do it well. And then ideally you stop, and then you rest. Parasympathetic nerves take over. You process all the things that you took in. Your body gets to heal itself, and everything works really well the next morning again, right? But if you're always stressed, then you've got cortisol, and then on top of that, cortisol. So it's like a little extra energy to do the task, then a little extra energy to do the task, and then a little extra energy to do the task, right? And you end up being like depressed and exhausted because you can't do the task. It's too much for you, right? That reminds me of my favorite psalm. You know, I God, I'm not. It's Psalm 131 where, the prayer is basically like, hey, God, I'm not taking anything on that's going to cause me to be crushed. You know, I don't have to do anything that is too much for me. I'm just like a baby who's with his mother and just finished drinking milk, and I'm satisfied. Got what I need. And that's kind of what we need to shoot for, I think, to be able to be satisfied with what we have and not to take on too much. But anyway, how does this relate to shakuhachi, right? The idea is that when you're in a situation like this, you want to be able to kind of activate the parasympathetic nervous system. And that's where the difference between Myoan Shakuhachi and Shakuhachi as performance comes in. Because if you're playing as a life practice, a spiritual practice, a health practice, then you want this to be relaxing, right? It's not, you don't need an extra stress. Now, granted, when you're learning a shakuhachi piece, at first, you've got, certain things to remember. When you first start playing shakuhachi, of course, you've got to be able to make a sound, I guess. Your fingers have to remember some things. So you will be using that sort of the sympathetic nervous system. You're kind of a little bit more active, learning new things. But as you get to know the piece, you want to be able to relax into it. You don't want to be kind of always on. That's how I talk about it to myself. I don't like to be always on. I'm somebody who is easily stressed. Um, and I don't mean like, oh, I'm stressed. But I mean like, oh, this takes a lot of energy for me. I need a lot to be able to do this. If I'm in a situation teaching 30 people in a classroom, I need a lot to be able to do that. It takes a lot. And if I do too much of that, I end up wearing myself down. And what I noticed in my conversation with my wife today is that, when we hear about stress, lots of times we hear the best thing to do for stress is meditation. That's kind of where this comes in to an extent, and exercise. However, I've always been drawn to kind of aerobic exercise, and even in terms of prayer, lots of times I'm drawn to silent prayer. That was part of my interest in shakuhachi from the beginning, right? I don't always have words to say. And I think part of that is if you're somebody who's easily stressed, you need to kind of not be active. Sometimes you have to be able to be off. So how do you let your prayer time, your practice time, or your shakuhachi time, how do you let it be restful? The thing is, if you're overly stressed and you exercise, that actually can work against you. This is my personal experience, and it also kind of came out of my conversation with my wife this morning. If I'm already stressed and tired and I try to do aerobic exercise, it actually crushes me even more. You'd think like, okay, you're burning the stress off and stuff, but the thing is, you're making your body active again when it's already active, and you're making it more active. And I've noticed that almost paradoxically, when I'm, instead of muscle building activities or like running and that kind of thing, if I'm doing things that are more like Tai Chi or, stretching, breathing, this sort of thing, uh, that actually gives me more muscle, right? Because I'm letting my body rest and recover from the stress that I have given it. So how does that apply to shakuhachi? Right? If you want your shakuhachi playing to be restful, if you're not playing for entertainment, there's a couple of things that you want to consider, right? Number one, you don't need to pay specific attention to pitch. You want it to feel good, I guess. I usually like it when things feel good, don't you? But it doesn't have to be this sort of modern image of shakuhachi that we've had. If you go back 100 years, 200 years, all the likelihood of, I'm going basically off of what I've learned myself from my own teachers and also from other players I've heard in Japan, some of the oldest recordings that we have, pretty much everyone seemed to play towards this way, right? It's the tendency, it's not an absolute rule or anything. Right, when I play for you a bit of Choshi, right? Right, a feature of old style playing, one feature is that we play open hold. Why do we do that? It feels good. It feels good in the way that your breath goes through the flute. The breath isn't obstructed or restricted in any way by this half-holing. You also don't have to do this kind of awkward half-holing that's not quite precise. You just do it with your breath. So that's how it is in terms of the body, right? In terms of the fingers, the holes are opened. You don't have to do too much thinking around here. The meri is done with the breath. And then how meri it goes depends on you, depends on what's comfortable to play, depends on the flute. But generally speaking, a tsu-meri is not the dai-meri. That doesn't really happen in Myoan music. Although some Myoan players will do it, depending on their mood, depending on if they're performing for people at the moment. If they're making a recording, they do tend to play a little bit lower sometimes. I've seen this in some players that I even know today. And some flutes respond to breath differently as well, right? But generally speaking, the tsu-meri is kind of right in the middle there. Why? Because it's comfortable. There are some other reasons, but in terms of stress, let's kind of just approach it from this perspective for now. It's comfortable to play it that way. Another thing about it is that, this pitch tends to move in different pieces. One thing that I learned is that if tsu is going down, it tends to be lower. If the next note is ro, for example. If the next note is re, sometimes it's played a little bit higher. Right? It's a movable pitch a little bit. If you play it kind of in the middle, it's easier to go up or down from there, right? Like so. Another thing is, if you are not straining your body, and if you're not straining your mind to make these very low pitches, if those are difficult for you to make on your flute or, for whatever reason, that also helps you to rest a little bit. The idea, I think, is to not worry too much about your pitch, but to pay attention more to how your body feels and how the sound feels. When you're paying attention to the sound, if you listen to the tone color more than you listen to the pitch, it kind of helps you not to judge it. If you've ever studied mindfulness at all, this is, something that comes out of Buddhism, but many people use it. It's used in the medical field. Christians use it as well. It's not something that's specifically religious. The idea is to spend time with non-judgmental awareness, right? And this is a tool. It's not for all the time. There are things that we need to judge. It's important to judge truth in our lives, or whether our thoughts are about this or that are accurate. There's things that we do have to be critical about to an extent sometimes. But when you're in this relaxation mode, you want to just kind of be able to observe and not judge. And that is what helps activate the parasympathetic nervous system. So if you're not judging your pitch, but rather just observing your tone color, I don't know if you noticed, but I got a little bit quieter while I was playing because I was listening. Listening is good. It feels good. So when you're playing, if you want to play as a practice, it's good to play as much as possible in a way that doesn't stress you out. You will have to have the understanding that if you're learning a new piece, it will take some extra attention. But a good way to practice is kind of to do that when you have it. And if you don't have a lot of the extra attention at the time, just spend time going a little bit more deeper into something that you're familiar with, right? There's always room for depth. Even if you just play one note, right? Just in that, you can hear, well, how much am I present right now? Are my thoughts wandering to other things? Is my breath long? Is my breath short? Is it quavering? Is it quivering? Right? Do I have too much caffeine in my body right now, or whatever? Right? You can kind of know a lot just from that one thing. That can be a good way to practice as well. But I think one of my goals in terms of what we're talking today when I'm playing is to be able to play in order to kind of encourage the parasympathetic nervous system. I have enough active time, I have enough on time. I like my playing to be kind of off time as much as possible. I do have times when I'm like, I'm going to study this piece, I'm going to do a little bit of that, I'm going to, but I find playing with other people very relaxing because I'm not paying attention to myself, I'm paying attention to somebody else. That's kind of enjoyable as well. But when I'm playing by myself, then, for me that's prayer time, and it's not time to be critical of myself, right? It's just time to be honest. That's probably all I have to say. I hope that I gave you something to think about or to enrich your playing a little bit. We'll see you next time. We'll talk a little bit about the same subject next time from, instead of the perspective of stress, a little bit from Japanese music history and that sort of thing, about why Myoan players play the way that we do, especially with respect to the chi and tsu meri pitches. Cheers. I can't find the off button. Hang on. Here we go. Okay. Bye-bye.